Hi there, and welcome to my channel. Whether you've been following me for a while or just tuning in now, I'm really happy to have you here. Something that's been really alive for me lately that I want to talk a little bit about in this video is healing and the cycles of healing that we go through. Over these last couple of years, I've had to revisit some cycles of my own healing journey that surprised me in some ways, scared me in some ways. It's been a bit of a process to sort of work through having to re-heal certain things that I felt like I had already healed in the past. It can be really frustrating and scary when we have symptoms that come up that we thought we'd already worked through. And so I want to talk about this also just so that we can normalize that a little bit, normalize the fact that healing is not linear, that it is cyclical, that we go through ebbs and flows, and that when we're in a low period, it doesn't mean that we're failing, it doesn't mean that we're getting permanently sick again. It doesn't mean that we're not still moving along that healing journey. It's just part of that process. I think it's part of being human, and the ebbs and flows that come with life. So for me, the instability of uprooting my life and making some major choices in where I was going to live, how I was going to live, what I was going to do to make money, what my relationship with money was going to be, going through the processes of sort of like uprooting the old version of myself and transitioning into the new version of myself that I'm still in transition moving towards, really created some stressful and traumatic scenarios of having to increasingly let go of things that I was sort of clinging to, that I thought I was clinging to for safety, but in reality, it was like holding me back from stepping fully into my own power. So all of these losses were culminating, and I was still trying to resist some of the losses and causing myself more trouble by trying to cling on to things that I thought would keep me safe, but in reality were sort of rooted in my own trauma narratives that I hadn't fully unpacked yet. And it culminated in a time period where I was probably the most ill I've ever been. And that was like a lot to come to terms with, feeling like I had gone through a really big healing journey for several years leading up to that point. Suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, how am I back here again? How am I feeling these things again? And so I really sort of had to kind of like re-go through my healing process from scratch a little bit. Not entirely from scratch, but I had to go back and rework through some of the things that helped me the first time around to get myself back on track so that I wasn't staying stuck in those dark places that I was finding myself in. So to back up just a little bit, my healing journey officially started about 6 years ago, a little bit before that. And that was when I really got serious about needing to make some major life changes. And it was a result of my mental health getting to a place where I could no longer deny there was a problem. For most of my life, maybe all of my life, I believe I've lived with chronic anxiety and depression on and off. Um, but it was normal to me. It wasn't, it didn't interfere enough in my life that I identified it as something that needed to change. I thought everybody was just like kind of anxious and unhappy all the time. Because I do think we live in a culture that normalizes being a little bit unhappy all the time. So I had some of those experiences like 6, 7 years ago that really shook me up. My functioning was affected to the point where I was like, okay, I have to make a change. And there was some really foundational work that I had to do. I went into therapy not knowing how to separate my emotions from my thoughts. I didn't know how to identify what was something I was feeling versus what was something that I was thinking. I was totally disconnected from my body. I was like living entirely up here from a very mental place, which was terrible for my anxiety, terrible for people pleasing, terrible for perfectionism. It all kept me right up here, completely disconnected to what I was feeling on a deeper level. I had to figure out my physiology. I had to figure out how to get back in touch with my body and how to soothe my body and calm my body down. I also had a lot of shit to unpack. I didn't think that I had trauma. Um, Spoiler note, we all have trauma. If you think you don't have trauma, we all have trauma in this society. So I had to really do some deep looking into myself of really kind of like validating my life experiences, validating the things that had happened, the encounters I'd had from early childhood into adulthood that had hurt me, that had left pain with me. That's what trauma is. It's when we have an experience that shifts our reality, that shifts the way we view people, that shifts the way we view ourselves, that puts some sort of fear or discontent within our bodies. I had a lot of unpacking of that to do because I had lived a life where I'd sort of just denied that I had any sort of trauma, and I was fine, and my life looked okay, and I was able to perform the way society demanded I perform. And so, that meant that I didn't have anything to worry about. So I have done a lot of processing childhood shit that I wasn't able to process at the time, and that the adults in my life weren't able to help me process. And so it just sort of like lingered within me unprocessed and just sort of like subconsciously playing out in really all of the relationship dynamics I've had my entire life since then. I also did have some hidden subconscious traumas that I needed to tap back into. There were experiences that I had that I didn't know how to handle at the time, and my brain, out of protection, had put in a little box and shoved in the back of my consciousness, and I had absolutely forgotten about it. And so I had to go back through and open up some of those pieces and really look at the full experience of what I'd been through. So that was like a lot of laying the foundation. I had to gain some of those foundational healing skills to even understand what healing was in the first place, to even understand how I could get myself to a place of feeling better. So, it took several years of practicing talking about my emotions and feelings, and journaling and journaling and journaling, to get to a point where I knew myself and I could tap into myself better and deeper, and have more understanding of what I was experiencing. It took really integrating those physiologically regulating processes into my everyday life. And that's been like a continuous conscious effort of bringing those practices forward when I have started to feel those little waves of anxiety that come up through my body. And in those moments, it's like, okay, let me take a breath. Let me look at what I'm feeling right now, and let me focus on calming my body to back down. Let me focus on teaching my body how to feel safe again. So after some of those foundational pieces were put in place, and I had, like a healing base that I could build from, uh, I started a process of deconstruction. It was largely internal, taking a look at the ways I myself had bought into belief systems and paradigms and ways of living and ways of thinking that, in fact, were harming me. And it was a question of like, well, crap, this life I've built looks nothing like the life that I think I actually need for myself. And what do I do with that? And so it was a slow process. It was one step at a time of shedding the pieces that weren't me. It started largely internally, but then moved to external aspects of like, how am I showing myself in the world? What do I want my life purpose to be? It's like 9 to 5 professional normative thing that I've been socialized to think is like what I wanted for my future life trajectories, like the kind of work that I wanted to do. And as a social worker, that was like really deeply personal to me, realizing I was never actually going to be able to thrive in those kinds of environments. And then what do I do with that? And that's part of the cycle I've been going through the last couple of years of really getting deeper in that deconstruction phase of, okay, what am I still clinging to that is holding me back, that is keeping me from reaching full happiness, reaching my full potential? Why am I still holding on to those things? What is it going to take to let go of those things? And so that's been some of what has, sent me back into downward spirals recently, is the loss that has come with some really significant deconstruction, and really like restarting a whole new life over in another state with nobody I know, in an entirely different culture and an entirely different lifestyle. So coupled with that deconstruction phase is the reconstruction phase, is the rebuilding of like, okay, if all that stuff is no longer what I am, and I'm slowly shedding those things, then what am I filling in its place? And that's the benefit of deconstruction, is that it like allows space for there to be something new to build in. In my old life structure, I couldn't have rebuilt myself any differently in that container because I was what that container had created me to be. I had to deconstruct my environment to be able to live a different life, to be able to figure out what else is out there. And it has felt a little bit like that in some of those like darker deconstruction moments of when I've really been sitting in some deep, deep depression, when I've been having, physical symptomology of stress that I've honestly never experienced before in my life, when I was feeling like I was hitting some of those new mental health lows. At the same time, I think there was like always a little bit of a spark of hope because I knew it was part of rebuilding something new. But it's like in that moment when you're in the deconstruction process, you don't know what the new thing is yet. Like I didn't know what the new thing was yet. And so it was really hard to feel all that excited or hopeful or optimistic about something that like I didn't know what was coming in to replace what I was losing. And so it just felt like an emptiness almost. It felt like I was just losing and I didn't yet have anything that was filling that back up. It's been a slow process, and there's definitely been times within the last 6, 7 months that have been really challenging. What I know about humans is that when the conditions are right, when our environment allows for it and supports it, the healing happens naturally. So even when it's happening slowly, like even when I felt like I wasn't making any kind of change at all, I still did this thing of like zooming in and zooming out, of reminding myself of like where I was at in my healing journey and recognizing like, okay, yes, I feel stuck. That doesn't mean that I am stuck. I knew that if I could recreate those conditions for myself that allowed myself to heal, then the healing would return, then the healing would come back. And in fact, what I am starting to believe is like the more we do it, the more we cement those processes, the more we practice them, the more we build those muscles, the easier that healing gets too, the easier the healing comes. When the conditions are right, we naturally heal. And for me, I needed a lifestyle condition that was like part of the whole deconstruction thing, was blowing up the life that I'd had before. So I could figure out like, okay, what kind of a lifestyle is actually going to support my mental health instead of be a detriment to my mental health. For me, that means a lifestyle where I'm much more connected to nature, much more outside, much more able to free flow. So choosing to live in a van and reduce my costs that way, choosing to travel and experience a nomadic lifestyle for a while. Those are ways that I'm able to create an environmental circumstance for myself where I'm connected with nature, where I have a lot of time to move with flow, where I don't have to be sitting in an office for 30, 40, 50 hours a week, staring at a computer or being inside without windows. For me, nutrition and what I'm putting in my body has also been really important. And that's in part like, what am I consuming? What am I eating? What am I drinking, etc. But it's also how am I giving myself what I need? So figuring out what supplements might be helpful for me. Sleep is something that I've been continuing to struggle with getting back on track. And so looking into like what are natural supplements that can help reestablish a sleep cycle, looking into different herbs that can help with chronic stress, noticing even the difference between when I drink coffee and how I feel throughout the morning and the rest of the day versus when I drink a new beverage that I've started to drink, which is tea based and has turmeric and has other things that help my brain feel alert without the buzz of anxiety that caffeine gives me. And that is not to say like there is no, I don't believe in perfection anymore. Like, let me not say that I never have coffee anymore, but it's like overall, the majority of the time, how am I making my choices? It's not that I'm only eating food or consuming things that are good for me. It's just that in general, that's my intention. Like that's my direction. Most days, most of what I'm consuming is, I know, healing for me, are things that make me feel good, are things that will support my mental health, not things that make me feel lethargic or anxious or brain foggy, fuzzy feelings, such as coffee, such as heavily processed foods. A big part of a condition that I need personally to heal as well is to continue to deprogram myself from the society that honestly made me ill in the first place, the society that makes many of us ill. Capitalism fueled productivity culture is toxic. It hurt me, and I have seen it hurt so many other people. And it's a challenge because there are realities that we're in right now living in a system of capitalism. Survival is a real thing. Needing money to pay bills is a real thing. But there are other impacts of capitalism that I think we're only just starting to realize as a society, and that's the way that capitalism and colonialism has embedded itself within to our mental processes, has embedded itself into the way that we think about ourselves, the way that we think about other people, and the way that we think about living on this earth. So deprogramming from this capitalistic productivity culture has been an ongoing practice of mine that is absolutely a critical part of my mental health, because as soon as I start to slip back into that old capitalistic narrative of like, oh crap, the reason that I'm here is I need a job and I need to make money and I need to have a house and I need to protect what's mine. Like, that's the American dream, right? Protect what's yours. That is also how oppression and white supremacy and settler colonialism continues to exist in this society. And then at the same time, it keeps us trapped in those paradigms of my purpose here is to be a worker. My purpose here is to produce. I better go, do, earn my worth. That is a mentality that was subconsciously programmed within me through society, through my upbringing, through education, through everything that conditions us today, commercials, TV shows, pop culture, etc., etc., etc. And it was terrible for my mental health. It was terrible for my mental health. Capitalism taught me to people please. Capitalism taught me to burn myself out. Capitalism taught me my worth was going to be obtained through my career path. Capitalism totally disconnected me from deeper questions and ideas and knowings of who I really am, who we really are, what we're really here for. We are not here to be slave robots until we die. So for me, deprogramming from capitalism productivity standards is a really critical practice for my mental health and my healing journey. So that looks like, what am I consuming? What news sources am I reading? How often am I engaging with the news? What music am I listening to? What people am I interacting with? What kinds of conversations am I having with those people? What does my media engagement look like? What does my social media engagement look like? For me, touchstones have been really important in that. To me, a touchstone is something that you can return back to again and again, that's going to help remind you of what you're doing, of what you believe in, of who you are, of what your purpose is, of what your calling is, of what your soul wants for you. For me, finding those touchstones of like, who are the people, where are the places, what are the sources of information that I can tap into that's going to reconnect me with what I actually want to be programming myself with, which is not capitalism mentality, which is a more liberated mentality. So where do I find those spaces? What are the places that make me feel open? What are the places that make me feel expansive and inspired? How do I get more of that? And how do I keep myself away from the places that make me feel contracted or afraid or crazy? Programming myself has also been programming myself with the messages that I want to believe. So using my meditation practice to consciously practice, what is it that I'm intending myself to believe? What do I want to program myself with? We are being programmed by all of the information we receive throughout the day, all the time. It is happening subconsciously a lot of the times because we're, in this culture, we move throughout our lives subconsciously. We move throughout our lives without a lot of conscious awareness and critical intention. Lately, my morning practice has been about love and really inviting myself to feel that I am loved and that I am worthy. And so part of my meditation practices, I'll spend 5 minutes of my time meditating, just repeating that mantra. My mantra is, I am loved, I am love. So I breathe in, I am loved, and I breathe in the love, and I feel it in my body, and I imagine all the ways that I know that I am loved, and I think of the things that make me feel loved. And then when I breathe out, I internally repeat the mantra, I am love. And I focus on my heart expanding. I know that I am here to share my love with the world. I can feel that as my purpose. And so it's like that's the way we program ourselves, is we feel it, we feel it, we feel it, we believe it, we believe it, we believe it. And even if I can only feel that and believe that for that 5 minutes in my meditation practice, that still is going to change me. That still is reprogramming my brain to do the things that I want it to do and let go of the things that I don't want to believe anymore, which is that worth, love, etc. is tied up to all these other productivity pieces of having to be a certain kind of person, having to earn a certain kind of way, having to do certain kinds of things, etc., etc. And that's something I really want you to take away from this video, is that relearning, reprogramming, reconstructing, it is a conscious process. Once you've figured out some of those baseline pieces of those foundational aspects of like, really, what do you need to do to get yourself at a decent mental health baseline? What are the missing pieces? Where are you trying to fill in the blanks from things that you didn't get earlier in life? Because we're not really taught well in this society what to do with our feelings and emotions and how to process trauma or what trauma is. So you've laid some of those foundations. You're asking some of those deconstruction style questions of like, what about my life isn't working now? Who are the people who I don't really resonate with anymore? What kind of content or belief systems don't actually align with mine? To me, the reconstruction phase is the fun phase. That's the, what do I want to color this in with? Now I've created this space, and what do I want to color this in with? And that's where we get to ask ourselves, like, what really makes us happy? What kind of life do we actually want? We might not know the answers to all those questions yet, but it is a matter of like following what feels good to us. When I watch a particular video, when I read a particular book, when I have those moments of being like, wow, I really feel connected to this, or I really feel inspired or fired up by this, those are signs of what we need more of in our life. Those are signs of the things that we can call to us and build into our life to reconstruct something, to create a container that's going to allow us to heal. The things that keep you feeling hopeful, the things that keep you feeling optimistic, the things that keep you going. It's a slow process. Again, it has taken me a few years to get myself back to a place of feeling really good. It's really been within these last few months that I feel I've been able to focus more on the reconstruction instead of just kind of like mourning those parts of the deconstruction. But I want us to have faith that it's happening. Just because something isn't immediate, just because we're not getting the best outcome that we might think we want, it doesn't mean that good things aren't around the corner for us. It doesn't mean that we're failing. It doesn't mean that our healing journey isn't working or is over, or that we've reverted back to our old version of ourselves. Healing is a cyclical process. And as we deconstruct, we're gonna have things to mourn. We're gonna have feelings that we don't want to feel that we're gonna have to work through. We're gonna have to figure out those deeper versions of like, what is still keeping me stuck? And that hurts. It is painful to uproot old ways of being. It is painful even when it's something we know that we want and need. It still hurts. And we can't be afraid to feel that. We have to feel it. We don't want to get stuck in it. We want to keep our touchstones. We want to keep our things that keep us feeling hopeful. We don't want to stay only in the past and the suffering, but we do have to feel it to get through it. And that's another thing that I would, remind myself of when I was having those darker moments of feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get out of this terrible, awful feeling. I would remind myself that feeling it is the way to heal it. By feeling it, I am releasing it from my body. I am not keeping it stuck and trapped within me, which was my old coping mechanism of denying emotions and denying the ways that I felt unintentionally, but still, we have to feel it to heal it. And that can require support from other people sometimes. That might require support in different ways, but we have to feel it to heal it. And at the same time, we, I think, really need reminders of what's on the other side. Finding those people, those places, those spaces, those things, those songs, those books, the things that keep you grounded, surrounding yourself with that, knowing that you will be through what you're feeling. So all of this is still a work in progress to me. I think it's a lifelong journey thing. It has been a lifelong journey up until this point, so it probably will continue to be so. But I can tell after the second round of healing some really major differences for myself internally in the way that I feel and the way that I'm showing up in the world. And that to me is making this whole thing worth it. So I want to share this as I don't know, maybe an inspiration for you, maybe a reminder for you, maybe one of those touchstone moments for you of knowing that If you're finding yourself in a place of like not sure where you're at in your healing journey, or feeling like you're not doing it well enough, it's not happening fast enough, I want to share this perspective that it is cyclical. It's not linear. It is not a simple process. It's not as though you snap your fingers or do a couple things and then you feel magically better. It is an ongoing journey to navigate. And it is one that as we continue to practice, it gets easier and easier. And there's benefit in those moments of being really down. I didn't feel it at the time, but now in retrospect, what I would say to that version of myself is just like there's benefit in it. And I think I knew it on some levels. It's just hard to believe that when you're feeling so heavy. But there's benefit to those moments. There were things that I needed to let go of. There were things that I needed to process and feel. I needed to make some different choices, and I needed to look at things that I was being resistant to look at. And the strength and the gift that is coming from doing that work is what makes healing worth it. Oh my. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed the message, I invite you to subscribe to my channel below. These are topics I really enjoy talking about, and I can't wait to continue the conversation. Until next time.